So hello and welcome to another episode of Biographics. I'm your interim host, Karl Smallwood. Yes, that's my real name. And today we're talking about John Dee, the necromancing navigator of the Elizabethan age. And this is a video I've been informed is going out during spooky season, my personal favourite time of year. But due to the way you have to make videos, I'm recording this in September, so I don't have my Halloween costume yet, which was going to be the Grim Reaper from Horrible Histories, which I will be wearing for videos on my own channel, Fact Theme with Karl Small, which you can find a link below. But I should mention that, as with all of our videos, this one is based on an original script submitted by one of our handsome and well-endowed writers. This one being Mr. Larry Holsworth, whose links to socials you can find below alongside my own. So John Dee serves as a counsel to Queen Mary I as well as Queen Elizabeth I. He received his personal guidance from astrology, communication with angels, fellow scientists and his own religious fervour. He owned one of the largest libraries in England. He travelled to the capitals of Europe to deliver lectures on subjects as diverse as algebra and zoology, quite literally the entire alphabet. He was a fellow with Sir Walter Raleigh, Sir Francis Drake and many other notables of the Elizabethan era. He was a man with a past that is exceedingly difficult to separate from myth and legends. An example of this is a story of what allegedly happened during the Spanish Armada. So John Dee was a student of meteorology at a time when predicting the weather was virtually impossible. He is said to have used this knowledge to recommend to the English that they refrain from early attacks as the Spanish Armada approached England. Dee predicted heavy storms would beset the Armada, and when they did, some claim that he used his powers of the occult, another area of study he enjoyed, to bring down a curse on the unfortunate Spanish, dooming them at sea. The English ships rode out the storms at anchor and then attacked the few Spaniards that remained. And that's a great story, though it's likely false. Dee was in Europe during the year of the Armada, and his knowledge of meteorology is exaggerated by reputation of the legend. His reputation as a magician grew following his death, and though he studied alchemy and magic, he was not known for casting spells, at least not among the educated of his day until very late in his lifetime, when he had managed to grow the requisite wizard's beard. He had a deep interest in cryptology. The interest has led many to consider him a spy for Elizabeth I, using his lecture tours and visits to foreign capitals to collect intelligence and reporting it in coded messages to Her Majesty. He was said to be then, quite literally, under Her Majesty's Secret Service. Some have even claimed him to have been the inspiration for Ian Fleming's James Bond, though evidence to support the assertion is somewhat thin. Reports that he signed his coded messages with the number 007 have been repeated frequently online by lesser websites and channels, but documented evidence of such a signature has never been found. And I guess it kind of makes sense. He was literally, Her Majesty's Secret Service. Separating truth from fiction in the life of John Dee is difficult, though not impossible. Legends and tall tales intertwine with his legitimate study of the occult, the power of numbers, and the influence of the planets and stars on humanity and the language of angels. Largely forgotten today, he was a major influence on the Elizabethan age, giving to posterity, among other things, the term the British Empire. John Dee's father, Roland Dee, was a mercer, a dealer in fine fabrics if you don't know, and courtier to England's King Henry VIII. As such, John's early youth was spent in the presence of royalty. Born in 1527, John's education began at the age of 8 when he entered the Chelmsford Chantry School, which still exists today under the name King Edward VI Grammar School. John remained at Chelmsford until 1542, when he enrolled at St John's College in Cambridge. He achieved a bachelor's degree in early 1546, though some sources say he actually graduated the preceding year. Among his areas of study, which were numerous, were Greek, Latin, scripture, navigation, astronomy, mathematics, geometry, and law. His scholastic abilities were formidable, and upon the founding of the Trinity College in 1546 by the aforementioned Henry VIII, Dee became an original fellow. While at Trinity, he applied his knowledge of magic of all things to create stage effects for stage productions. This led to his reputation as, I shit you not, a magician, which became so widespread that William Shakespeare himself may have modelled his character of Prospero in The Tempest on Dee many years later. In 1548, Dee travelled to the continent to continue his studies and conduct lectures on subjects, as mentioned, as broad and varied as algebra, cartography, and the Greek mathematician Euclid. He also collected astronomical instruments and books on a range of diverse subjects. When he returned to England in the early 1650s, he settled near London to concentrate on writing, study, and acquiring a position in the royal court. Though he never became a mercer like his father, he did become a member of the worshipful company of mercers, as an inheritance when his father passed away. In 1655, he cast a horoscope for Queen Mary I, as well as Princess Elizabeth. The result of his efforts was a charge against him of conjuring, which was later raised to treason. Dee was arrested and imprisoned before being tried before the Star Chamber. He was tried for a charge which carried the sentence of execution, but he somehow managed to achieve an acquittal, talking his way out of it. Not liking the idea of letting him completely off the hook, the Star Chamber handed Dee off to the Bishop of London, Edward Bonner, to examine him for heresy. He managed to talk himself out of that one too, and he and Bonner became close friends and allies in court. Following his acquittals, Dee approached Mary with the idea of creating a national library which would be tasked with the acquisition and maintenance of books, maps, charts, records, manuscripts and artifacts for the support of education. Although Mary did not charter such an establishment, Dee began to collect such materials on his own. He kept a library at his home in Mortlake, just outside London, a library that became the largest in England for the time. While Queen Mary's supporters were evidently none too pleased with Dee's astrological abilities, Princess Elizabeth's were. When Elizabeth ascended to the throne in 1558, Dee was approached by her closest advisors to use astrological data to select the best date for a coronation. Dee selected, after again casting the Queen's horoscope, the date of January 15th, 1559. Dee then served in Elizabeth's court as her chief scientific and astrological advisor, a strange combination to modern eyes. Although geographic expansion would seem to be outside of those disciplines of thought, Dee became an early proponent of the establishment of British colonies in the New World, as well as a fleet to protect them. He supported voyages of exploration and indeed discovery through his work in improving navigation, cartography and astronomy. He prepared charts and maps, acquired and supplied navigational instruments and instructed seafarers in their use. Dee worked quite closely with Francis Drake, Martin Frobisher and other British captains of exploration and discovery, instructing them in navigation and cartography, as well as astronomy, how to read the stars and travel so you don't just end up at the arse end of John O'Groats when you set sail. Dee exhibited an early and deep interest in the possibility of a northwest passage on the continent of North America, which would provide a quicker, safer passage to the lands of Asia. He also advocated the creation of permanent colonies and in the process created the term the British Empire. The Queen supported his ideas and the English voyages to the New World increased, though it would be many years before a permanent settlement was ever established in North America. While serving as an advisor to the Queen, Dee greatly expanded his library at Mortlake, eventually acquiring more books and manuscripts than any other library in all of Britain. He graciously made his library available to scholars freely and even held conferences and seminars with visitors from across Britain and the continent. While serving as Elizabeth's chief astrologer, he also devoted a great deal of his time and attention to numerology. It was his belief that numbers and mathematics held the keys to communicating with the creative forces of the universe. In 1564, he published a treatise entitled Monas Hieroglyphica, or the Hieroglyphic Monad. His work provided a detailed analysis and explanation of a glyph, or symbol, of his own invention. The symbol combined alchemy, mysticism, metaphysics, and astrology, and represented a key to unlock the hidden secrets of the universe. According to its creator, this symbol was the monad. Dee claimed, among other things, that meditation on the monad would offer insights, including greater knowledge of alchemy and the secrets of transmuting metals to gold. His glyph was eventually adopted by the word I'm going to struggle to pronounce, the Rosicrucians in the 17th century spiritual movement that first appeared in the German provinces. He also travelled to the New World courtesy of the Puritans under John Winthrop Jr., one of the founders of the English New World colony of Connecticut. In an admittedly more practical vein, while in Elizabeth's services, Dee proposed that her government adopt the Gregorian calendar. That effort was sadly and frustratingly in vain due to the Protestant reluctance to adopt an idea proposed by a Catholic. Though several of Elizabeth's advisors agreed with Dee's suggestion, her reluctance to offend her Protestant supporters with what would have been a pretty radical change doomed the idea. There was also sufficient difficulty for establishing colonies in North America due to problems, mostly of limited financial support. Only one failed colony, the lost colony of Roanoke, was established in Dee's lifetime, and I'm sure we've done a video on that. We must have done a video on that at some point, and it'll be linked on the screen. It's a fascinating story that has undergone many embellishments over the years. I won't spoil it, but yeah. Click that video after finishing watching this one. By the mid-1570s, Dee believed his influence and standing in the royal court had waned somewhat, and several of his most cherished projects, a reformed calendar, building an empire in North America, and the search for a Northwest Passage had failed to gain Her Majesty's approval. Many of his political opponents believed him to be a sorcerer and conjurer, and a powerful one at that, in a time when witchcraft was greatly feared as well as a capital crime. He began to delve more deeply into the occult, hoping to find within the secrets of science that had not yet been revealed to him. John Dee is often described as having possessed the ability to communicate with angels and beings beyond our understanding. That description is, shall we say, inaccurate, though he did transcribe alleged angelic communications given to him by another. To explain, in the 1570s, Dee began using a scriver, a crystal ball, in order to contact spirits from another world. Among the spirits that he attempted to communicate with were angels as described in the Bible. Biblically accurate angels, those like crazy ass, like twirling monstrosities of eyeballs and wings. He was unsuccessful, though attempts were made through several experienced scryers as well. In 1582, Edward Kelly presented himself to Dee. Kelly, sometimes called Edward Talbot, had a somewhat bizarre appearance, the result of a somewhat checkered past. His earlobes, for example, were cropped. Cropping earlobes was a common penalty for several crimes in Elizabethan England, among them forgery and counterfeiting coins. Kelly claimed to be an alchemist and scriver who had successfully contacted angels in the past. He supposedly demonstrated this skill to Dee that same year. Dee was a smart dude, and the guy comes up displaying the very obvious results of attempting to counterfeit money. And they claim to have discovered and unlocked the secrets of alchemy, transmuting base metals into gold. And he trusted this man. The following year, Dee, Kelly and their families left England to seek patronage from various European nobles. Kelly claimed past support from Emperor Rudolf II in Prague. However, Emperor Rudolf was, shall we say, unimpressed with their claims and demonstrations and declined to support them. A similar effort with King Stefan of Poland yielded similar unsurprising results. Dee and Kelly then travelled across Central Europe for a couple of years, communicating with angels in their seances, with the angels communicating only with Kelly, who would repeat their messages to Dee. Dee then would translate them from an occult language he called, among other names, the language of angels. Subsequent scholars have renamed this to the Enotian language. And again, Dee, you're a smart dude. You've got a guy who cannot be trusted, literally is bearing the marks of committing a crime that involves deception, and they will only communicate with you. And they cannot demonstrate any of the skills they claim to possess. What are you doing? During their travels across Europe, Kelly and Dee frequently clashed regarding their goals. And to put us all on the same page, Dee wanted to derive the secrets of creation for fairly noble purposes, because his idea was that the dissemination of that knowledge would end religious conflict. Kelly, on the other hand, wanted to concentrate their joint efforts in alchemy and find the secrets to transmute base metals into gold. And it's worth noting that Dee wasn't adverse to solving the mysteries of alchemy, but he believed that his divine mission took precedence. And moving back to that subject, according to Dee's own diaries, the language of the angels was transmitted to Kelly in stages, with the first delivered on March 26, 1583. Kelly claimed that his crystal revealed 21 individual letters. Later seances revealed squares of letters, 49 by 49, which were duly recorded by the pair. The angels evidently did not want to go to the effort of translating these letters to their English equivalents, leaving that task to their receivers. Dee undertook this task with aplomb, translating the language to a great extent, and expressed his own belief that this revealed language was the one that was spoken universally before the events described in Genesis 1:1. And in that chapter, if anyone doesn't know, God observed the construction of the Tower of Babel. He states, and I quote, "Go to, let us go down and share their confound their language, that they may not understand one another's speech." Genesis 11:7. In 1586, William of Rosenberg, a wealthy Bohemian nobleman, offered his patronage to Dee and Kelly, and they settled for a time in the town of Trebon. In early 1587, they were commanded to appear before the papal nuncio to answer charges of necromancy, or attempting to communicate with the dead. As he had before with the Star Chamber, Dee managed to answer the questions without being further charged. Kelly, on the other hand, aroused the ire of the nuncio. In a later letter, the Bishop of San Severo, who served as the nuncio, reported that he considered the defenestration for Kelly a common form of execution in Bohemia at the time. And this is a word that I love, one of my favourite words, and it just means throwing someone out of a window. And as rare as you might think that sounds, there is a small city in Prague where it happened 3 times. And these events are known quite fittingly as the first defenestration of Prague, the second defenestration of Prague, and the third defenestration of Prague. I made a video about it on my own channel, Fact Fiend with Karl Smallwood. And perhaps Kelly had had enough, perhaps the reaction of the papal nuncio frightened him to the point he decided to escape Dee and his work, or perhaps the angels really did communicate to him the message he claimed to receive on May 1587. So Kelly reported that an angel he called Medimi, some sources say the angel was actually called Uriel, had instructed he and Dee to share their wives and all of their worldly possessions. Just gotta let that one sit. Dee, being the smart man he was, of course complied with this request, and according to his diary, on May 22nd, 1587, the deed was done. And we don't really know how both women felt about this, though we do know that they fasted and received communion before the event took place. Though he had compelled with the angelic command received through his partner, Dee also used the event to bring the seances to an end. Kelly left his service and lived in luxury as a patron of several Bohemian nobles and continued to claim he possessed the secret of transmuting base metals into gold. Dee, on the other hand, returned to England in 1589. It's a hustle, and I guess you kind of got to respect the one of like, oh, I'm not getting communications anymore. I've got one last one. They want me to bang your wife and you to give me half your money. It's like, I guess he was just a true believer. Contemporaries, including fellow antiquarian John Aubrey, described Dee as a very handsome man, with a long white beard, customary for a wizard. He habitually wore long robes with hanging sleeves, creating the image of a stereotypical sorcerer of the 16th century. Man went forward. He was wizard maxing in the 16th century. What a legend. Dee is known to have been married 3 times. The first was in 1565 to one Catherine Constable, of whom very little is known beyond their marriage, and that she died in 1574. They had no children together. His second marriage, on the other hand, took place in 1575, just a year later, and ended with her death the following year. Her name is unknown. Again, she bore him no children. His third marriage, on the other hand, was altogether more fruitful, and this was to Jane Fromond, a lady-in-waiting in Elizabeth's court. Together, they had either 7 or 8 children. We say this because 9 months after the liaison between Jane and Edward Kelly, commanded by the angels, she gave birth to a child, which the Dees named Theodore Dee. 3 of Dee's children are known to have survived him. His eldest son, Arthur Dee, apprenticed with his father in alchemy and other subjects, accompanied him on his travels, and eventually practiced as a consulting physician. He served as such in the court of Tsar Michael I in Russia, and eventually in the court of Charles I of England. While in Russia, he translated much of his father's work into Russian. The translations were eventually stolen by yet another charlatan and perhaps powerful wizard, the mad monk Rasputin. Arthur too spent much of his life in the vain pursuit of converting base metals into gold, with about the same level of success achieved by his wizard father. When John Dee returned to England, he found his home in Mortlake in ruins. His gardens had been destroyed by vandals, and much of his extensive and impressive collection of manuscripts, books, and navigational equipment was missing. He also found England was, shall we say, hostile to him. The occult, magic, witchcraft, and other practices associated with him in the public's mind made him suspect. And can we just give props to the people who thought it was a good idea to rob a wizard's house? I know alleged wizard, but still, these were very superstitious times, and people just thought nothing of. Addition to as well, we're going to rob his house and step on his flowers. Meanwhile, rumours reached London that Edward Kelly, in the service of Rudolph II, had reached the point in his alchemy at work that he could actually start producing gold in large and vast amounts. Elizabeth wanted Kelly in England, ensuring the result of Kelly's labours enriched her coffers rather than Rudolph's. She instructed her agents to invite Kelly to return to England, which may or may not have contributed to his subsequent arrest and incarceration on the continent. Knowing of his past relationship with Kelly and unaware of the rift that had arisen between the two men, he banged his wife, Elizabeth granted Dee the position of Warden of the Christ's College in Manchester. She hoped that Dee could help persuade Kelly to return, and the position was far enough away from London to distance her from the scholar and wizard. Dee assumed his new position in 1695, and he remained in Manchester for the next 10 years, demonstrating little interest in his duties. Although he admittedly did fare better than Kelly, who in 1597 or 1598, sources aren't really clear, died after being injured during an escape attempt, according to some sources. Other sources claim that he was just executed because he couldn't produce gold. With Kelly's death, Elizabeth had no real further use for Dee, but he remained in his position as warden despite the growing enmity of his colleagues. He gradually rebuilt much of his personal library and continued his research in diverse subjects, which included, remember, being a cool wizard. Elizabeth died in 1603, succeeded by James I, who had even less use for a wizard than Elizabeth did. No longer influential in court and alienated by his colleagues at Christ's College and suspected of witchcraft by many more, Dee's stature in England waned. In 1605, a wave of plague swept through Manchester, taking with it Dee's third wife and several of his children. Following that loss, he returned to Mortlake. He supported himself and his daughter Catherine by slowly selling off his possessions and valuable manuscripts, living in poverty and infamy. He died in 1609 at the age of 81. So yeah, he lived to 81. Big old white wizard work. Like I say, what a don. John Dee is remembered chiefly as a sorcerer, a practitioner of the occult, and a necromancer who received communication from the angels and other spirits, a legacy that is somewhat unfair and certainly, at the very least, incomplete. He likely did not predict the storms that severely damaged the Spanish Armada, nor did he recommend the English captains remain in port as the Armada approached. Another version of that story was that he was warned of the Armada via angelic communication in 1587. Regardless, he was in Bohemia in 1588, the year of the Armada, not in London, so even if he did receive this communication, he had no way of getting it to English forces. Nor is there any empirical evidence that he travelled throughout Europe as a spy for Elizabeth I, as is often asserted. His travels were directed at obtaining patronage, that is to say financial support, for his research and experimentation in alchemy and angelic communications. He was too busy communicating with them angels to, think about spying. There's also no document proven to have been signed by Dee himself that bears the cryptic signature 007. Empirical evidence of him having been dispatched to foreign courts as an agent of Queen Elizabeth has also yet to be found. However, scholars do generally agree that Dee did serve as an inspiration for Prospero in Shakespeare's The Tempest. Prospero, for those who don't recall, is a sorcerer sufficiently powerful enough to control spirits and have them do his bidding, which Dee never seemed to be able to do, despite his, wizardly appearance. Several aspects of the life of John Dee and the fictional Prospero are in accord, yet Prospero was a pagan while Dee was a devout Christian. Shakespeare wrote The Tempest in 1610-1611, several years after Dee's death, and there's no record of the two ever meeting during Dee's lifetime. Shakespeare would certainly have been aware of Dee, and it's possible that they did meet, but if so, nobody recorded this momentous event, the time when Shakespeare met a wizard. Most of Dee's actual contributions to what evolved into the British Empire are overlooked, because wizard, buried underneath the myths and legends attributed to him. One of them being the coining of the term the British Empire itself. Just 2 years after his death, his vision of a permanent British colony in North America came to fruition, the founding of the settlement of Jamestown in Virginia, 1607. Likewise, his contributions to astronomy, mathematics, navigation, as well as his skills as a cartographer contributed greatly to the explorations in North America as well as in the Indian Ocean and later in the Pacific, but they are also overlooked because, again, wizard. He was also clearly a jurist of considerable skill, having successfully defended himself before the Star Chamber, a papal nuncio, and before many foreign courts at various times who accused him again of being a wizard, during a period when those suspected of being a wizard were routinely condemned and executed. Maybe he was a wizard. Or maybe just really good at arguing, we'll never know. As for his study of alchemy, well, I guess you can snicker at that. It's worth noting that at the time and for centuries afterwards, alchemy was a legitimate field of academic pursuit that was undertaken by many notable names throughout history, including Isaac Newton and Carl Jung. The same is true of angelic communication. Dee was following what he genuinely believed to be a legitimate scientific pursuit when he engaged in the process of communicating with angels and recording their language. Edward Kelly may have been likewise sincere, though a consensus of scholars is that he was just a charlatan who wanted to use the more reputable Dee to promote his scams and bang his wife. And it's instructive to remember that Dee never personally claimed to have heard angels' voices or visualized them in the crystals. Only Kelly saw the letters and presented them to Dee. Seers have been gazing into crystal balls and predicting events ever since, just as they had before Dee came to the practice. And it's kind of sad that his reputation as an eminent scientist and philosopher was already in tatters later in his life, with widely ranging reports of his sorcery, necromancy, conjuring, and practice of other black arts supplanting his numerous scientific achievements. His reputation dipped so low that Dee petitioned King James for protection against slander and libel, writing to the king in 1604 and explaining that none of the, and I quote, very strange and frivolous fables or histories told of me are true. The king did not respond. So I hope everybody enjoyed this video and is getting ready for the spooky season. I certainly am, and as mentioned at the start of this video, unless it was cut out because the editor's a coward, I will be wearing a Halloween costume for our week of spooky content over on FactFiend, as well as Wiki Weekends, which I run. I don't think I have time to wear a costume for Wiki Weekends, but we'll definitely be doing a week of spooky themed content. Also, as mentioned at the start of this video, the script that I'm reading from was written by one Larry Holsworth. Follow them on socials that you can find below. Otherwise, if you enjoyed the video, leave a like. If you've got something to say about it, leave a comment. Let us know your favourite spooky season movie and or generic monster. Mine is, it's got to be the skeleton, which is why we have the skeleton bit in the background. That's Bonely. That is a beloved mascot of my channel, FactFiend, and he's been in near enough every video I've recorded for the past 3 years. In addition, if you have anything to say about my hosting and presentation style, also let me know in the comments. It'd be nice to get some feedback as I try to settle into my role as interim host for this channel. If you want to see more videos like this, subscribe, and as always, everyone out there, have the day you all deserve. Cheers.